The Earth is a farm. We are someone else's property. Charles Fort. World War II was a conflict like no other. Never before or since had the lives of so many been impacted so greatly in such a terrible way. The industrialized world had never before seen such horrors. It was a conflict that was in many ways defined by the technological and mechanical innovations of the day, created for the purpose of warfare but finding utility in the future of civilization. Even as Germany seemed to be losing ground in the war, the Nazi regime achieved advancement in technological warfare with jet aircraft, supersonic rockets, guided missiles, stealth technology, and something beyond even our comprehension today. William Brawley and Zechariah Sitchin hypothesized in their books The Gods of Eden and the Stairway to Heaven that overwhelming evidence of extraterrestrial intervention throughout all of history suggests that they have been watching or perhaps even guiding us along our human path. The book of Genesis suggests that the sons of God came unto the daughters of man, perhaps a metaphor for the first referenced case of extraterrestrial DNA modeling with humans in the Holy Book. The Bible has numerous references to unidentifiable objects in the sky, even more than in Project Blue Book, and many of the events therein lend themselves to extraterrestrial interpretation. But so do other early texts and artworks that predate the Bible by centuries, by virtually every early and ancient culture on Earth. From the very beginning, mankind's works of art and literature are littered with testimony of gods, demigods, angels, demons, all of which descend from the heights to communicate and interact with man. This is never more evident than in the Paleolithic rock, which conveys through imagery a message that once in the distant past visitors came from the skies and were among us. Once known as Persia, but now known as Iran, was the location of Earth's first civilization. For all of our study in this enigmatic place and forever a mystery, the Sumerian civilization seemingly arrived overnight, replete with language, agriculture, commerce, and family structure. Ancient Sumerian texts claim that the gods came down to Earth, created man, and set human culture into motion. A Sumerian coin depicts the home of one god, with what appears to be a rocket ship in the background. The Vatican holds the earliest written account of a flying saucer, inscribed on 1500 BC-year-old papyrus. It describes a noiseless circle of fire descending from the sky. A 3rd century mask uncovered at a Celtic site in the Czech Republic more resembles an alien gray than an abstract animal head. Stories of visitation from otherworldly crafts and beings have seeped into world consciousness. Paranoia and conjecture run high. From radio broadcasts of War of the Worlds to the conspiracy theories that both JFK and Marilyn Monroe were assassinated to conceal a shared secret, that the government had proof that UFOs are real. One thing is certain, aliens and UFOs have entered our psyches in a big way, and it seems like they have been around a long, long time. It has been insinuated that the first televised event was a speech by Adolf Hitler. In truth, the Third Reich was indeed responsible for the first great television revolution. Television was a fantastic new technology developed by the Nazis which proved indispensable for the purposes of winning the propaganda war. Between 1935 and 1944, the Nazis delivered the world's first television news service, which also included sports coverage, an evening news roundup, and interviews with government officials. A live broadcast of the 1936 Olympic Games was a threshold moment in a medium yet to conquer the world. But there were other advances which were at least as remarkable, yet purposefully clandestine. In 1934, the Vril Society was commissioned by Adolf Hitler to build a flying machine which could escape the limits of the solar system. Hitler's esoteric sect, the Black Sun, had emissaries in Tibet, attempting to learn meditation techniques which would be utilized for the purposes of communication with extraterrestrials. A Nazi occult linked to the near apocalypse of World War II was established, but in regards to initial alien communion was the rogue group, the Initiated Brothers of Asia, who had already adopted the powerful symbol, the swastika, as their own, are said to have established the first ever known contact with alien greys. The entities promised that one day their kind would descend on mankind and take possession of our sexual vitality. Is it then any coincidence that Adolf was prone to episodes of paranoia where he would react in screaming outbursts to some entity that only he himself could see? By the time Hitler had reached the pinnacle of his power, it is said that the Nazis had a secret weapon, a flying disc capable of flying 1,200 miles an hour, vertical ascension, and able to outmaneuver anything the Allies had at the time. A second vehicle, more advanced and powerful than the first, was equipped with a laser gun which was able to penetrate 4 inches of armor. Nothing is known as to the whereabouts of the crafts after the world set forth on the road to recovery from devastation resulting from the decade of major conflict. However, many of the brilliant minds which created the weapons used by the Germans during the Great War were brought to the U.S., where they were essential in developing our own space program. It is said that these personnel also returned to the work of designing and building flying saucers. There is information now to bolster this assertion. The V-173 was described as a flying pancake, was considered evidence of Nazi flying disc technology advancement after the war. It is thought to be the craft which would account for the explosion of saucer sightings around the U.S. from the late 40s into the 50s. The craft was built by the Chance Vought Company. It is either the V-173 or perhaps another Chance Vought saucer that was witnessed by 20-year-old Thomas Smith sometime in the years predating Roswell. Smith had special clearance at a military installation which granted him the experience of watching test exercises. He said that the 40-foot wide craft hovered about 10 feet off the ground for a time before it ascended into the night sky. The vehicle was manned by a single pilot who would lie flat in a cramped compartment. Smith says that Chance Vought moved their operations to Texas in 1947 in an attempt to find better flying conditions. It was in that year that flying saucer reports began, starting with the Kenneth Arnold account in the Cascade Mountains of Washington state. Arnold stated that the objects looked like saucers skipping over water. Soon other reports exploded around North America. UFOs were suddenly everywhere in large numbers. It would not be long before a saucer report of great notoriety would be reported in nearby New Mexico. What caused the outbreak of mysterious flying objects? Were sightings in any way related to the onset of nuclear weapons testing, or perhaps a result of experimentation with new psychedelic drugs flowing into the culture? Or were we witnessing the continued work of German scientists in conjunction with the new American aerospace industry? Area 51, Dreamland. For years, this area in the Nevada desert northwest of Las Vegas has been the location of a military base utilized for top-secret research. Some believe that this location was set aside for study of alien spacecrafts, while others say it was the place where government officials made deals with the aliens themselves. In 1989, physicist Robert Lazar claimed that he had at one time worked for a government agency on an esoteric project at the Area 51 location. His job was to assist in reverse engineering the propulsion system in an alien spacecraft. He said that he came forth with his revelations as a means of self-protection from the organization and individuals for which he worked. These mysterious entities had supposedly threatened him for speaking of his duties at the base to outside interests. Lazar states that he was employed at Los Alamos when he began looking for other opportunities. At this time, he was approached by the father of the hydrogen bomb, Edward Teller, who told him to seek out a contact with a contractor in Nevada. Soon Lazar was about to begin work with a special majestic security clearance on a project beyond anything he could have imagined in a location known as Dreamland, Skunkworks, The Ranch, Area 51. When he received a phone call from his new office, Lazar and others would be prompted to catch a waiting 737, which was on loan from the Department of Energy, and fly to a location outside of Groom Lake where a bus with blacked-out windows would transport the staff to Area 51. The secret facility was said to be built into an entire mountain range with the facade completely made to look like sand and rock. Lazar commented that the scene reminded him of a set for a James Bond film. It was only when he was first led into the mountain base that he was truly mystified. He was instructed not to say anything, only to keep his eyes forward as he was led through the complex toward the facility offices. Lazar was guided past a large disc-shaped object. He slid his hand along the object as they passed. He said it appeared to have been pressed out of a single piece of sheet metal. Soon he was in an office looking at briefing papers detailing the nature of his employ. He was going to be working on some sort of propulsion system, to be sure. Then he realized how advanced these systems were. They were quite literally from out of this world. Before long, Lazar had witnessed 9 crafts in all. Some were intact, others were in various states of either construction or deconstruction. Lazar described the appearances of the different crafts: the Jell-O mold, the top hat, the sports model. At one point, he was allowed inside one of the vehicles. He recollected a small room, seemingly crafted from one piece of raw material and with tiny seats, too tiny for human beings. On another occasion, he witnessed a manned test flight. The power source was said to have been provided by an antimatter reactor, fueled by mysterious element 115. Lazar speculated that the budget for the black programs at Area 51 were derived from funding from President Reagan's proposed Star Wars project. Lazar went on to claim that on an occasion as he walked through the hall in the Dreamland facility, that he looked into a room and saw two men standing next to a small being with long arms. Before long, intimidation ensued, as well as other mind control tactics produced with mind-altering drugs and perhaps hypnosis. Soon Lazar walked away from Dreamland and came forth with his story. He passed numerous lie detector tests and still stands by his claims today. Subsequently, other secret witnesses alleged encounters with super-performing craft in the vicinity of Area 51, while parties of casual viewers who ventured as closely as base policy would permit came back with more stories and even video documentation of these machines performing unearthly maneuvers. These events culminated with the 1992 NBC video of a light bouncing about the skies over Dreamland. Pentagon correspondent Fred Francis described the light as a UFO. Soon after, the security was increased and warning signs about the location perimeters threatened deadly force against trespassers. Casual visitors would receive life threats from personnel looming about in automobiles and from above in helicopters. The world's fascination with the mysterious base was only beginning. Lazar was most reluctant in relating details of briefing papers on the subject of the aliens and their intention for mankind. These papers alleged that Jesus Christ and two other spiritual leaders were planted here as genetically engineered prophets and their progress monitored. Robert Lazar could very well be a liar. He could also be a part of a disinformation plot on behalf of our government. But for what purpose? Some say his motivations are simple, either monetary or for the pursuit of fame. Either way, there was far more going on in Dreamland than anyone cared to admit. The psychic aspect. It has been theorized that alien beings, as we have come to recognize them with their small, slender bodies and large heads, might originate from another dimension rather than from some extraterrestrial location. While the world was recovering from World War II, a science fiction writer by the name of L. Ron Hubbard joined former jet propulsion scientist John Whiteside Parsons in a unique secret project. This project unfolded as a series of magical workings in the vast California desert. These ceremonies, called the Babylon Workings, were rites composed by the notorious beast Aleister Crowley. Crowley was credited for bringing Satanism into the industrial age. He himself claimed to have psychic communication with the group of higher beings he called the Secret Chiefs, and on an occasion drew a sketch of one known as Lamb. The intent of the Hubbard-Parsons workings were to open a long-sealed interdimensional gateway between our world and the one in which beings referred to as the Old Ones exist. Consensus is that the workings succeeded and something came through the portal. Parsons claims that it was Babylon and the fourth chapter of the Book of Law. Others have suggested alternative possibilities, but all agree something beyond human understanding occurred at this time, something that changed our reality forever. Roswell. Some assert that the flying discs being developed in the mid-20th century were not wholly human designs, but they were attempts to reproduce, by methods of reverse engineering, recovered alien crafts. Such an assertion is made in retired Colonel Philip J. Corso's book, The Day After Roswell, a formal official reveals the U.S. government shocking UFO cover-up. Corso goes on to outline the subsequent scientific developments resulting from the study of materials found at the Roswell saucer crash site. Microwave technology, lasers, malleable metals such as aluminum, and even Velcro are said to have been designed from the alien materials. Corso served as chief of the U.S. Army's Foreign Technology Division and was a member of President Eisenhower's National Security Council. Corso went on to discuss the problems encountered in German and American experimentation with flying saucers in a 1997 interview with CNI News, where he claimed scientists could never get a handle on the propulsion or guidance systems that an alien being recovered from the Roswell site was seemingly part of the guidance apparatus himself. Our visit to Roswell was a pleasant one. There we visited the local military academy and, of course, all of the local gift shops, all of which stock just about anything and everything you can imagine which has anything to do with the subject of aliens and UFOs. Most notable was our visit to Roswell's UFO Museum. There we found much information, documentation, and artworks relating to the subjects of the Roswell UFO incident, but provided by those who have a serious interest and belief that the saucer crash was a real and true event. Our best explanation of the Roswell event came from a novelty shop owner who is on the board of directors for a planned UFO resort that is in early stages. He relates that on the evening in question there was a terrible lightning storm and local Army 509th Base radar monitors spotted two objects darting around on radar a few miles northwest of Roswell. The best guess for what happened next is that one of the unidentified flying objects was hit by lightning and lost control of its guidance system, which subsequently caused it to crash into the second object. Both objects came crashing to Earth, one due east and the other farther southeast towards Roswell.
The following is the story as it unfolds, as told by retired Colonel J. Corso in the first chapter of his book, The Day After Roswell. 509th Base radar outside of Roswell had been tracking strange blips all night on July 1st, 1947. These blips were also appearing on radar monitors at nearby White Sands and at a nuclear testing facility in Alamogordo. The objects were traveling at impossible speeds and seemingly maneuvering unlike any known aircraft. Operators ran equipment checks on monitoring equipment, tested calibrations, ran diagnostics. Tests on the equipment turned up no conceivable malfunctions. The operators then continued to watch as the blips seemed to transverse across the skies over the Army's most secret nuclear and missile testing sites. The following day, surveillance flights scanned the airspace above the desert for any sign of unidentified aircraft, to no avail. The radar anomalies continued on the following night. On this night, however, there was a massive thunder and lightning storm moving in. The Wilmots family sat on their front porch watching the natural fireworks show. Suddenly, a bright oval object streaked over their house and into the northwestern sky. Steve Robinson saw the same object as he drove his milk truck. 3 nights later, on July 4th, while the rest of the country was settling in from a day at the festive celebration for the occasion of American independence, the 509th radar monitors were once again lit up with an indescribable pulsating light show, relating the activity of two objects traveling at speeds of over 1,000 miles an hour. Soon, a thunder and lightning show of biblical proportions enveloped the sector until there was a flash on the screen. Then nothing. Whatever they were, they had crashed, and a plan was implemented within seconds by the military to recover the object before anyone else found it. Later, we would learn that, evidently, some farmers on the outskirts of town and a few campers saw what they assumed was an aircraft exploding and plummeting to Earth. Although the crash was thought to have occurred before midnight, the recovery vehicles arrived on site of the debris field at around 4:30 in the morning. On the scene were hazmat personnel, medics, signalmen, sentries, and radio operators. None were prepared for the events about to unfold, but all of whom seemed to function methodically and unthinking, as the time for reason and rationality had passed, and strict adherence to procedure was highest priority. And then as work lamps and headlights illuminated the scene, the dark-skinned craft came into view. The soft-cornered, delta-shaped eggshell-type craft was essentially in one piece, and with its nose buried into an embankment with its tail in the air. The craft had 2 tail fins on the Delta's feet that pointed up and out. The radiation crew moved inward to check the craft, which was still giving off a significant amount of heat, when illumination devices revealed 2 beings, gray, each about 3 to 5 feet tall, stretched out nearby. It appeared that they had tumbled or crawled from the vehicle, which had a large gash torn into it. Soon, another figure was spotted nearby, lying motionless. Then another. Finally, a 5th being was located. As soon as the radiation team gave all the clear, the beings were placed onto stretchers and carried away. Through the top of the craft, a light emanated. It was as if, under the twilight sky, a beam of sunlight was coming from within the craft itself. Soon, the debris was collected and the craft was placed on a flatbed truck. Dan Dwyer jumped down from his fire truck and stepped up next to a stretcher. He looked into the large, dark eyes of the creature that was no bigger than a child. It was certainly not human, although it had human-like features. Its nose and mouth were little more than mere slits. Its skin was grayish-brown and it provided an expression of terror, almost like an animal caught in a trap. Military personnel cautioned Dwyer and quickly loaded the stretcher into a waiting van. Before long, the retrieval process was near complete. The crews worked to remove any shred of evidence of the event from the desert plain. Dwyer spotted something on the ground. It appeared to be metallic, yet cloth-like material, which he quickly concealed in his pocket. He crumpled it into a ball in his fist. Then you released the material and it snapped back into shape without any creases or folds. He would not show anyone the material for 45 years, until one day he would present it as the only remaining evidence of that fateful day outside of Roswell, New Mexico. As the final pieces of debris were cleared and the crews retreated back into town, a military MP grabbed Wire and hustled him off to a major who told him to evacuate back into town and to never speak of anything he witnessed that day.
Men in Black. The popular MIB myth dates back as early as 1950s and 60s paranormal culture, although most of the MIB encounters are thought to have occurred throughout the 70s. A visitation from a man in black usually coincides with some otherworldly experience, most often a UFO experience. MIBs utilize intimidation to either convince a person that they have experienced an imagined event or simply to prevent them from retelling their story to others. They may make inquiry for more information, but are as likely to persuade individuals into maintaining silence. MIBs are said to either be radically out of step with contemporary fashions or oddly ahead of modern style. Although MIBs are said to have an air of strange, enhanced intelligence, they are easily baffled by common, everyday items and utensils. Otherwise, the term men in black can easily function to describe the typical government official, usually one who functions within a secretive organization.
Governmental quotations. Once at a White House screening for the film E.T., Ronald Reagan was said to have whispered into the ear of Steven Spielberg, "There are probably only 6 people in this room who know how true this is." And on at least 3 occasions, Reagan stated that if faced with an extraterrestrial attack, that the U.S. and Russia would join forces to repel it. Here is a collection of statements and the officials who made them. This amazing phenomenon is something real and not visionary or fictitious. General Nathan Twining, Chief of Staff, U.S. Air Force, in an Air Command Report, 23 September 1947. The Intelligence Office of the 509th Bombardment Group at Roswell Army Airfield, New Mexico, has come into possession of a crashed flying disc. Lieutenant Colonel Walter Haut, base press officer in his official press release, July 8, 1947. It was later retracted. The wreckage was strewn over an area 3/4 of a mile long. We couldn't really figure out what it was. Major Jesse Marceau, U.S. Army Intelligence, based in Roswell. I insist on full access to the discs recovered. The Army grabbed one and would not let us have it even for a cursory examination. J. Edgar Hoover, in a handwritten memo from July 15, 1947. Highly secret government UFO investigations are going on that we don't know about. Senator Barry Goldwater, who claims he was denied access to the Blue Room at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where UFO artifacts are said to be stored under acute security. The evidence is now so consistent and so overwhelming that no reasonably intelligent person can deny that something unexplained is going on. Lord Hill Norton, Admiral of the British Fleet, Chairman of the NATO Military Committee, 1974 through 1977. More than 10,000 sightings have been reported. I am convinced these objects do exist and that they are not manufactured by any nation on Earth. Air Chief Marshal Lord Dowding, Commander-in-Chief of the RAF during the Battle of Britain in 1954. Flying saucers exist. The matter is the most highly classified subject in the United States government, ranking even higher than the H-bomb. Canadian scientist Wilbur Smith in a 1950 government memo labeled Top Secret. Unidentified flying objects are a very serious subject which we must study fully. 1967 televised statement by Professor Felix Zygau of the Moscow Aviation Institute. It is my view that the UFO situation has possible national security implications which transcend the interest of a single service. Memo to National Security Council from General Walter Bedell Smith, Director of the CIA, 1950 through 1953. For the last 6 months, we have been working on a congressional committee investigating official secrecy concerning proof that UFOs are real machines under intelligent control. Major Donald Kehoe, during a live CBS broadcast in 1958, although his audio was cut off mid-statement for reasons of national security. Behind the scenes, high-ranking Air Force officers are soberly concerned but through official secrecy and ridicule, citizens are led to believe UFOs are nonsense. Rear Admiral Roscoe Hillenkotter, director of the CIA, 1947-1950. UFOs do exist and are very real, and are spaceships from another or more than one other solar system. Professor Hermann Oberth, former German rocket scientist and father of American space travel. We do not deal with things of this world alone, but with ultimate conflict between a united human race and the sinister forces of some other galaxy. General Douglas MacArthur, in his address to the West Point Military Academy. In the early morning hours of August 23, 2001, residents of Lewiston and several other towns in southern Maine reported loud rumbling sounds as if from a huge object, as one resident explained. Buildings rattled and lights streaked through the skies until all such activity ceased. Moments later, the activity resumed even more furious than before. Authorities ruled out any reasonable explanation. On the early morning hours of January 31st, 1985, the crew of a Soviet airliner spotted what first looked like a yellow light, then a white ray, then a green cloud that turned into something that resembled an airplane. Ground radar reportedly tracked two unknown targets during the sighting. A huge circular light dropped into the middle of a group of Hawker Fury 1 biplane fighters over Sussex, England, on the night of January 5, 1933. The pilots first saw it above them, but within moments it was so close to them that one pilot had his hands and his face burned. The engines of two planes quit, but power was regained in time to land safely. Flat-topped mesas in Monument Valley, Utah, are now part of the Navajo Indian Reservation. These natural stone monuments are reported in Navajo myth to be sacred places where the ancient gods first came to Earth. On June 15, 1947, 9 days before Kenneth Arnold's sighting would coin the term flying saucers, Harry Von Piper and his landlady watched balls of fire over Lansing, Michigan. For 10 minutes, they jumped in and out of the clouds like clay pigeons, Von Piper reported.